And we want to welcome you to the second event of our winter workshop series with Underwood Conservation District tonight. And I'm Tova Tillinghast, I'm the district director here. And we appreciate you taking the time, both online and in person, with us tonight. And as you know, our topic is water rights 101 and conservation opportunities. And as the old Mark Twain saying goes, whiskey's for drinking, but water's for fighting. So tonight we'll be learning about water rights and the basics you need to know to effectively manage your water right complaint. And we have Tessa Reeder and Ethan Lockwood from the Washington Water Trust here today to provide foundational knowledge on this. And then we'll also hear about conservation incentives and opportunities to upgrade irrigation systems from John Culp from the Washington State Conservation Commission. So after a few years of doing the winter workshops, we have returned to some in-person events this year. And we love being able to offer both, even though it's a little technically challenging. So thank you again for participating one way or the other. And we know we'll have a really good dialogue in person with folks tonight. And then for those of you at home, hopefully you're enjoying the benefits of home. And we're getting the best of both worlds. So for those of you in person, there are restrooms through the side door of this room. For those of you on Zoom, just a couple of quick reminders to keep yourself muted through the presentation, and welcome your questions in the chat box. And then at the end of each presentation, we'll take a few minutes to answer any of those questions in the chat box. And so we'll take some time for that. And in the meantime, too, you can enter issues into the chat box if you're having any problems, and we can troubleshoot without interrupting the presentation. So I want to mention that all of our recent presentations and webinars have been recorded. So if you go to our website, you can find those past workshops, and we've covered a wide variety of topics. Last month, we talked about wildfire resilience. We've had a workshop about biochar and carbon markets for forest landowners. We've talked about succession, farmland planning. And then the Tree of Heaven topic is a really interesting, important topic right now, as well as a host of other issues that we've covered in the past workshops. So please go to our website and find those recorded webinars if you're interested. And we also have the slides in a PDF slide deck if you'd like to peruse those past events and presentations. If you know someone who should have been at tonight's workshop and couldn't make it, make sure to send them to our website in a week or so. We'll have this recording available and slide decks available for future reference. So the next workshop is coming up February 8th, and it's going to be all about native plant landscaping. It's definitely tied to our native plant sale. So take note that our native plant sale is going on, but we'll be talking a lot about native plant landscaping and the choices you want to make around design concepts and the types of species to select, and even how to plan to maintain those landscapes. And then we really encourage folks to actually come in person to that February workshop so that you can actually put pen to paper or pencil to paper and sketch out ideas and start creating a landscape for your yard. The Zoom experience will be abridged, shortened, and not as valuable as being in person. So we really encourage folks to sign up to attend February 8th workshop in person. All right. I would be remiss to mention again that our plant sale is going on right now. It ends February 29th. Tree Fest event happening March 23rd, and that's scheduled right here in the park, Reingarten Park, in the morning of March 23rd. So that's where our tree customers all come to pick up their pre-ordered trees, and you can also purchase plants in person that day as well. So we'll hope you'll come see us. There's always a lot of activity, live music, and fun. And as always, stay up to date by signing up for our newsletter online at our website as well. So I just have a couple slides to introduce who we are at Underwood Conservation District. We were established by Chapter 8908 of the Revised Code of Washington. We're actually a small local public agency, focused on renewable natural resources and helping landowners and residents manage those natural resources for the long term. Our mission is to engage landowners and land users throughout Skamania and West Klickitat counties in the voluntary conservation, enhancement, stewardship, and sustainable use of natural resources. And we were established in 1940, so we've been around for a little while. Here in Underwood, we were established right in Underwood, in the Underwood Mountain area, by tradists and farmers in that area. And we've expanded to cover all of Skamania County and Western Klickitat County. And we're the only conservation district to span the Cascade Divide. So we get the best of both worlds there too, with the west and the east side of Washington. As you can see, our district area includes Mount St. Helens, the flanks of Mount Adams. Our eastern border is the Klickitat River, and here we are. This is in White Salmon, but we work to provide our services all across the district. And then we have a wide range of different activities and programs and services that we provide. So if you have a natural resource question or concern, please just contact one of us. Our technician James is here tonight, so he can talk to you about all kinds of topics as well, especially related to ag and livestock and irrigation. So let us know if you have a question and concern. One of the programs I did want to highlight, and this is my last slide before we get started, is our farm to a library. And that's something that you can go online and peruse what our inventory involves. And we've got a small no-till drill and a manure spreader and several other tools surrounding lots of different best practices, soil management, soil monitoring tools, sampling probes for testing your soil, watering tanks for watering plantings, and all kinds of things. So we invite you to take a look at that inventory online and see what we have to offer through the Farm Tool Library. And then of course, there's lots of partners and other programs that we connect people with in the farming world. Okay, so with that, let's get started. This is our agenda for the evening. And as I mentioned, we have Tessa Reeder and Ethan Lockwood tonight from the Washington Water Trust to get going. And I'll introduce you to them now. So Ethan Lockwood joined Washington Water Trust in 2019 and is the project manager for the Upper Yakima Basin, Klickitat White Salmon Basin, and manages Washington Water Trust's Eastern Project Monitoring and Flow Monitoring. Prior to joining Washington Water Trust, Ethan worked as the Mountains to Sound Greenway Public Engagement Coordinator, where he led a human ecology mapping project analyzing recreation trends across public lands and developed the framework for the East Cascades Recreation Partnership. He also worked as a Forest Service resource assistant for the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, supporting the local forest collaboratives with facilitation, grant writing, and project development. He further served as the NEPA project lead for an environmental assessment for the Mountains Ranger District. He has degrees in appropriate technology and environmental design with a sustainable environments minor and a community and regional planning with an environmental planning policy concentration. So Tessa Reeder is a project manager with the Washington Water Trust Eastern Washington team. Tessa joined Washington Water Trust in 2022 and has supported and led water transaction projects throughout Eastern Washington. She is the project lead for the Methow and Okanagan basins and supports Ethan in Yakima and Little Klickitat White Salmon basins. Before coming to Washington Water Trust, Tessa spent several years working as a water resources scientist focused on stormwater management and compliance. She holds a BS in environmental science and an MS in water resources management. Let's welcome Tessa and Ethan. Yep. We'll let them share their screen and take it away.
Thanks, Donna. Let's figure it out here. Oh, not that one. Okay, are you guys seeing the right screen here?
Yes.
Great. Well, welcome and thank you for joining tonight. We're bummed we weren't able to make it in person, but we're glad that we're still able to hold this. So tonight we're going to talk about Water Rights 101. So we'll go into water law and water right basics and talk about some opportunities through the Trust Water Rights Program. So we work with the Washington Water Trust, also referred to as WWT. We're a nonprofit, non-regulatory organization that's been around for over 25 years. We work directly with water right holders to improve and protect stream flows throughout the state. We do this work through voluntary, cooperative, and market-based projects, with the Trust Water Rights Program being the foundation for this work. And it's important to note that even though we use the state Trust Water Rights Program to implement these projects, we're not directly affiliated with Department of Ecology because we're a nonprofit and we're non-regulatory. So any conversations that we have with water right holders or landowners are totally confidential, and that information never has to go to the state. And so that's kind of a unique niche that we're able to fill. So where do we work? It might be a little bit hard to see all the names of the basins, but as you can see, we work all over the state. We have an office in Seattle and an office in Ellensburg. And Ethan and I are both based out of our Ellensburg office, and we work in a lot of these basins that are on the east side of the Cascades. So tonight we're going to be talking about water law basics and water right basics, and then I'll hand it over to Ethan to talk about water right tools, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So under Washington water law, water is a public resource and cannot be owned, but a water right gives you the right to use that public resource. This is called an usufructuary right, and they are pertinent to the land and are sold with the land unless explicitly severed. Washington water law operates around prior appropriation, also known as first in time, first in right. So basically, the older the water right, the better. If you have an older, more senior water right, that puts you at kind of the front of the water cooler line, so to speak, with younger, more junior rights at the end of that line. A junior water right can't impair a senior water right holder. In Washington, we have a 5-year use it or lose it rule. And this means that a water right holder must put their water to full beneficial use at least once every 5 years. Otherwise, that water can be subject to relinquishment. And so when ecology looks at water use, they typically look at the most recent 5-year period of time to understand how you've been using your water. All water uses, both surface and groundwater, must be permitted, except in the case of permit exempt wells. You can't divert water that you don't have the right to use. And permit exempt wells include things like domestic or industrial uses that are up to 5,000 gallons per day, or irrigation of less than half an acre, or unlimited use for stock water. But otherwise, you need to have a water right in order to either withdraw or pump water. And finally, there are not many places in the state where you can actually apply for a new water right. So if a property doesn't have a water right, it's typically pretty difficult to obtain one. And this can happen through either purchasing of an upstream water right, or in some cases, I think in the White Salmon Basin, you can obtain a new water right, but you need to mitigate for that water right. And so this takes a lot of effort and also a lot of money typically. So for an all intents and purposes, you can't really get a new water right very easily. So what is a water right? It is a legal authorization to use a predefined quantity of public water for a designated purpose over a specified length of time. And water rights are managed by the Washington Department of Ecology. And any changes to your water right need to go through the Department of Ecology. There are a lot of different kind of phases of a water right that all often get referred to as water rights, but there are some nuances between them. So a claim is a claim that water was used prior to 1917 for surface water or 1945 for groundwater, because before that time there was no water code. So one could just claim water, and that counts as sort of a water right, but you can no longer apply for a water right claim. Any modern quote unquote claims of water need to go through a much more formal process that was instituted by the water code. And this process involves submitting the application, and then if the application meets certain criteria, then ecology will issue a permit, and the permit is permission by the state to develop a water right, but it's not actually a final water right. But once that water right is perfected or put to beneficial use, then a certificate can be issued. And a water right certificate is considered an actual property right. So this is what a water right looks like. This is an example of a water right from within the White Salmon Basin, and they all look a little bit different depending on where they were issued or when they were issued, but there are some common criteria that are always included. So there's the original name on the water right, which a lot of times water rights were established over 100 years ago, so that name doesn't necessarily match the current holder of the water right. And there will be a purpose of use listed, and so that might be like domestic use or irrigation or industrial. A season of use, so for an agricultural water right, those in most basins, agricultural water rights are not year-round. They're usually somewhere around April through October. So the right to withdraw that water is only for within that period. And then there's an instantaneous and an annual quantity specified. So that's both the withdrawal rate in cubic feet per second or gallons per minute, and then also the annual quantity, which is an acre feet per year usually. And then every water right has a priority date, which is the date that the water was first put to use. And this is what determines the seniority of the water right. And then there's also a specific point of diversion and place of use specified. And these are usually listed by township, section, and range on the water right. So that's what a paper water right looks like, but paper water rights and wet water rights are not always the same because water rights are maintained through beneficial use. If a water right hasn't been fully beneficially used, then it might not actually look the same way that it does on paper. So as I mentioned earlier, there's the 5-year use it or lose it rule. And so if a water right hasn't been used for 5 years or more, then it can be subject to relinquishment. So it's important to be really careful about this when, just thinking that you have a water right because maybe there's one on the deed or there's a water right shown by ecology that's associated with your property. If it hasn't actually been used, then it might not actually be valid. And so ways that we can find evidence of whether or not water was beneficially used, or ways that you can show going forward that your water is being beneficially used, are through meter records are a really great way because they show exactly how much water is being pumped or withdrawn and when. And pump records similarly can do the same. Cropping and seed receipts, we can figure out how much water would have been needed to apply to a certain amount of seeds. Photographs of water being applied to land with, like a date time stamp can be helpful. Affidavits of water use. We also will often use aerial imagery, looking at aerial photographs of irrigated fields. You can often tell where land has been irrigated and where it hasn't, especially in more arid areas. And the more lines of evidence you can provide, the better, because they can all support each other. And there are also 21 sufficient causes of non-use. So there are situations where your water right may not have been used for 5 years, but it's not subject to relinquishment. And some of these causes for non-use include military service, drought declarations, as well as putting your water into the Trust Water Rights Program. Do I have a water right? So how do you figure out if you have a water right? Maybe you have a property that you're not sure if it has a water right, or you're looking at buying a property and you want to find that out. Some ways you can do that are you can review the deed to the property, obtain copies of the water right, and you can get these from your local ecology office, or there's also Ecology has a web explorer, which I'll show what that looks like on the next slide, where that information is publicly available. If you find out that the property has a water right, it can be really useful to obtain records of use from the former owner, so that you can demonstrate that the water has been beneficially used. And it can also be really useful to look into if the property has shares of irrigation district or dish company water, maybe instead of an individual water right. So there's kind of a lot going on here, but this is just a quick screenshot of what Ecology's water rights map search looks like. And I've included the URL below, and I can send that in the chat later. But Ecology has a map of all the mapped water rights in the state, and you can either zoom in to an area and select a water right, or you can also, if you know the document number for the water right, you can look that up. But you can also look up by parcel or by address, coordinates, many different ways to zoom in and look at your water right. And then from there, you can find a description of the water right as well as the actual water right documents and any other ecology documents associated with that right. And now I'll hand it off to Ethan to talk about the Trust Water Rights Program.
Yeah, thank you, Tessa. And thanks, Toa, for that invitation. Like she mentioned, I got my actual start in natural resource management when I was in white salmon out of grad school, working with the Forest Service and the local forest collaborative. So white salmon area is a special place in my heart, and I wish I could be down there right now again, but hope there will have some more reasons to come down later. Let me get my screen share. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about the Trust Water Rights Program, what we kind of refer to as the best kept secret in ecology and water rights, and a really important program to learn about and be aware of if you have a water right or if you're looking at acquiring a water right. The Trust Water Rights Program and Washington Water Trust, like Tessa mentioned, are separate but kind of linked. The Trust Water Rights Program is a program within ecology related to water rights, but it's sort of the legal framework that lets us do a lot of the projects that we do. It came out in 1989 in the Yakima Basin and then statewide in 1991. And the key thing of the Trust Water Rights Program is it lets you put a water right into the program and it stops that relinquishment clock. So if for any reason you're not able to use or don't intend to use your water right for a period of time, rather than being subject to this concern about relinquishment, this provides an avenue for you to temporarily or even permanently donate or lease or park your water right and protect it during those intervening time periods. Like I said, it's managed by the Department of Ecology. And sort of what we say about water rights is what goes in is what comes out. So the water right doesn't get changed at all by donation or acceptance in the Trust Water Program. It retains all those same attributes that Tessa was talking about. And it has a lot of flexibility in how you can put water in and take water out, which makes it a great tool. And sort of one of the ways we like to walk through and think about the Trust Water Rights Program is sort of these 7 different ways that you as a landowner with a water right might think about using this program. So one of the big ones is if you've recently purchased property with a water right, you might still be figuring out a farm plan, you might still be in the process of moving to that property. And in that intervening time period, if you're not able or interested in diverting water, the Trust Water Rights Program is a great place to put that water, protect it so that it's available for you in the future, and gives you that time and space to really develop your farm plan or develop what you'd like to do with that property. Another way we think about using it is when a farmer might be changing the type of crop that they're growing. Different crops require different water quantities. Some crops are really water intensive, other crops require a lot less water. And if you're moving from a crop that has a high water duty to a crop with a low water duty, it can be nice to park or donate that difference in water use to the Trust Water Rights Program, so that if in the future you'd like to return to that high water duty crop, that entire water right is still available for that use. We also look at it when farmers are looking at upgrading their irrigation efficient or their irrigation systems from Sort of a classic example might be from flood irrigation that takes a whole lot of water to get it across the field to, as this image shows, a center pivot. That's a highly efficient way of putting water out across that field. That difference in water use between those irrigation systems can be put into the trust water program. And again, this is a really great way to ensure that if you ever had to return to a less efficient irrigation system, if you had a problem with that center pivot, if the property was sold and that center pivot was moved off it, the entire water right remains valid into the future. We also look at it when you might be thinking about alternative water sources to the current water source you're using. This might involve moving to recycled water if you're close to a water treatment plant. It might be if you have access to an irrigation district as well as a surface water right, and you're just going to use your irrigation district water. It's just another time where putting that surface water right that you have in the trust water program keeps it whole into the future. And it's another opportunity simply to be able to take a break from using your water. There's a lot of pressure to continuously use that water with this 5-year relinquishment concern in Washington. And so the trust water program is just a really nice tool that if for any reason you'd just like to take a break, not have to worry about putting water out for a year, you can just park that water in the trust water rights program. It keeps the legal validity intact. And when you would like to use that water again, you can take it back out of the trust water rights program and go back to irrigating. Similarly, if you're just unsure what you want to do with that water, maybe you've had a field that you've irrigated for many years, but you're not really sure that you want to keep irrigating it, or you're looking to develop it, or you're looking at maybe a change in ownership or kids taking over the property. It just provides space and time for you to really decide what you'd like to do. And finally, and kind of most important to the Water Trust mission, we're really interested in finding places where your water right might have a really beneficial in-stream flow value. So instead of diverting that water out of the river, the Trust Water Right program allows us to protect that water back in the river for fish and environmental flow purposes. And depending on where you are and the type of water right you have, you can make a really big difference to flows in some of these small tributaries. And that's sort of the type of agreement that the Water Trust looks to develop with landowners. We call them trust water rights agreements. They're sort of a flexible tool that change sort of the behavior of how and when you use your water. And they can really be beneficial both for the river and for the landowner. We can help people move to more efficient irrigation systems. We can help people move from gravity-fed systems to pressurized systems. And we have a lot of flexibility in sort of the length of those agreements too. Sometimes we'll use just a short-term lease, either paying a landowner to take a few seasons off from irrigating or take the end of the season off from irrigating. We also are able to do permanent transactions with water rights where we offer fair market value for that water right. And we also help people who might just be in the period where they'd like to donate that water while they sort of determine what their long-term future plans are. And so we sort of can come aside landowners, water right holders, and think creatively about what the best options might be for you. So we're really sort of looking at this top question here. Can we do a project that adds water to a stream when and where it is needed? A lot of streams in Washington are increasingly facing low flows. That's from climate change, that's from out of stream water use. And we know that our ecosystems and our fish are hurting in a lot of these systems. And so being able to put water back in the right place in the right time can make a really big impact. Like I said, we have sort of a big suite of different types of solutions. It's really working with you as a water right holder to think about where are you, what are your interests, and what might we be able to line up. So like I said, we do these purchases and leases. That's sort of the most common type of transaction that we do. We also can do just late season transactions. This looks like oftentimes when we have like a hay farmer who takes multiple cuttings of hay during the season, oftentimes those first cuttings of hay are the most productive. And that last cutting of hay, when the temperatures are really high and the growing conditions aren't as ideal, is not as productive for them. But that might be when the stream is at the lowest, and putting water back in might be the most beneficial for fish. And so we can have deals and structures where people can use water for the first part of the season and then turn off for the end. Same with for drought years, we're particularly focused on making sure that there's sufficient water for fish to move in and out of systems and escape sort of those hot water systems during the really low flow drought years. So we're able to structure transactions that might only come into effect during a drought year. We work with landowners sometimes on source switches, moving people, like I've said, from maybe a surface water right to an irrigation district. We can help people change their point of diversion. Sometimes that's just moving the point of diversion downstream so that there's less river impacted by that diversion. Sometimes that might be moving people from a small tributary that they have gravity fed water off of onto sort of a main stem where there's a lot more water and a pump station can get them that water. We work with irrigation's efficiencies. We'll hear more about sort of those programs from John Culp here. There's in Washington State these water banking and mitigation programs that are other tools for using water rights. We've worked with storage releases with larger water right holders. We've done different types of transactions, looking at ways to store water off channel, move water downstream. So it's a really big set of tools in our tool bag, which makes it really exciting when we do have people interested in working with us, because we can sort of tailor our interest and your interests. So one local example we thought we'd share is one of our trust water transactions on Rattlesnake Creek, tributary into the White Salmon River. This started as a lease transaction and then became a permanent transaction and put 136 acre feet of water back in stream. So that's the quantity of water that had historically been taken out for irrigation and now stays in the river, as that landowner has chosen, instead of irrigating, to be paid and permanently put that water back in the river. And then that's sort of a type of creek that we're particularly focused on. It's a creek that runs very low in the late summer, but has important habitat, especially for ESA listed steelhead. And so that addition of water back into the river is a big benefit. At some points, that river was dropping well below, or tributary is dropping well below 1 CFS of flow, and we put almost half of that back in, so almost doubled the flow of this small tributary in the late season. And if you were interested in temporarily donating water into the trust program, Ecology has recently made this actually a much easier process. There's a lot less information that has to be provided to them. There's this new donation form that's available on their website for you to fill out. You just put in your information, the information about your water right, how long you'd like to have it donated in the Trust Water Right program. And then we used to have to provide evidence that you've been using water, but they've recently switched to you just attest to that you've been using that water before. And so it's a very simple and easy process. You're able to take water back out of that Trust Water Right program, either when your donation expires or with 30 days notice to Ecology. And we're more than happy to help if anyone was interested in doing this with this process as well. So we're definitely one resource for help, but there's a lot of other resources out there as well. There's a number of different water rights attorneys and consultants that can help you understand your water right and how to protect and use it. Ecology's own staff are a great resource and are very willing to help landowners with those same sort of questions. Like Tessa said, there's this Water Resource Explorer online through Ecology, which is another tool to explore and look at water rights. And then we've provided links to these, the Washington State Water Law Primer and this Landowner's Guide to Washington Water Rights, which are good refreshers of a lot of what we've talked about today. Otherwise, I think we're happy to take any questions or talk more if you have something you're interested in knowing a little bit more about. And we've got our contact information there, and feel free to reach out to us. I know we'd been hoping to be in person, and if people had wanted us to help them look up their water rights, we're hoping to do that. We're happy to stay on the call later if somebody would like to do that. But also feel free to just reach out by phone or email to us, and we'd be more than happy to do that later.
I have a question. Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering if these water rights apply to personal wells. Because I live up Snowden Road and I have a very, very large garden. I wouldn't call it a farm, but I use a fair amount of water. And this place has been here since 1917 as well. So there's very likely that we do have some water rights here, but I'm wondering how this applies to wells. And the reason I ask is because we had someone who services our well, M&K drillers, come up and fix, they were looking at our pump. And he said that I'd lost 15 feet in my well and that he's seen this over and over up Snowden Road, as well as some people's have gone dry. And I'm wondering, as people build their homes up here, do I not have a right to the water from my well, or am I just SOL?
No, that is a great question and touches on things that the state has been dealing with and looking at these past years and how to handle it. We'd be happy to look sort of directly at your situation, but sort of in general, like Tessa said, there's kind of this carve out for these domestic wells. And so most domestic wells, when they were first established, didn't have to go under any review or permitting process. And those are the ones that Tessa mentioned that allow about 5,000 gallons of water use per day for domestic and small irrigation. The state has been looking closely at that question of why are some of these wells and aquifers losing water? Where is that water coming and going from? There's been a lot of questions about, are there places where that well water and river water may not actually be as separate of sources as we think they are? And so some areas of the state now, you do have to get permits for domestic wells where they've shown that there's this kind of connectivity between that well water and surface water. I don't know sort of the specifics of that area that you live in as well myself, but we'd be happy to look at it.
Okay, and then I have another question. Someone down the road from us, it's only visible if you park your car off of, you look down and there's a big new, very, very large pond, like someone's going to use it possibly for irrigation. And I'm wondering who do we go to make sure that's permitted?
Yeah, it would be a great question to go to the Department of Ecology for, and we can follow up or provide you contact information for the local ecology people.
Okay, and then one more. I have 2 springs on the property. And are there any special rights to those springs? They're on my property, one where water bubbles up, and then another one that all the animals drink out of. We kind of dug it out a bit. And I'm just wondering if there's any kind of special rights for springs. Like if I wanted to make a pond out of the one burbling up, can I do that, or do I need to go get a permit?
Yeah, sort of impounding water in that kind of way. Ecology does sort of have this tipping point. So like a bird bath or something, is not sort of a thing that needs to be permitted. But when they get to a certain size, and off the top of my head, I don't remember what their sort of tipping point is for when they require permits for it. springs are sort of a water source that you can get water rights for. You can find water rights that list springs as the source of water. If there hasn't been one historically used or filed, then you may not have one. But again, if you want to follow up and you'd like us to kind of look at your property in specific, we might be able to give a little bit better information.
Okay, great. And I would just contact you then through UCD.
Yeah, or I can put my email in the chat here.
Right.
Okay, I gotta go here. Um,
And I see we have a question
There was
there in the
another
chat.
Did you see the question in the chat about?
Yes, asking if there are similar programs to the Trust Water Rights Program in the state of Oregon. And yes, there is a similar program. It has different names and different terms, but it has very similar sort of outcomes and ways that it can be used. There are sort of nuances about how every state handles water rights, and there's some small differences, but there is a comparable program in Oregon.
There was another question in the chat about someone asking, does use it or lose it apply to group A water groups? Is that correct? And I sent it to Tessa.
Tried to pass that one to Ethan because I wasn't sure.
So yes, municipal water rights, or sort of these class A, class B water rights, which are referring to usually water for groups of domestic. The classes sort of talk about the size, how many connections you have to that. There's a little kind of different nuances for true municipal water rights. But in general, yes, the relinquishment still applies to those types of water rights.
Anybody else question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering about, but I don't know if it's called petitioning or asking ecology about changing a domestic water right to a non-domestic use water right. Is that, I guess, something that commonly gets approved, or is it even worth it to ask?
For domestic, so in general, water rights can have their attributes changed and modified. You're sort of bound by the limits of that water right still. So the sort of annual acre feet that you're allowed to divert, that instantaneous rate that's listed, those sort of define the water right, and you can change within those, but you can't easily step outside of them. There's also sort of this difference in water. We talk about consumptive water and non-consumptive water. I think of that easiestly around water use for cropping. If you think about like when you put water on a house plant, it's really hard to put just the perfect amount of water so that none of that water comes out the bottom of the container. And so crops evapotranspirate and use some water, but most of the time you have to divert more water than exactly what the crop needs. And ecology in Washington really hones in on this quantity that's consumptive and this quantity that's not consumptive. And when you're changing water uses, say from domestic to another use, that's something that they're going to look really tightly at is, are you changing that consumptive amount or not? So I wouldn't say it's something that is super common with domestic water rights, at least not in my experience. But it's definitely something that there's no legal reason you can't do it.
Thank you.
I got a question or a couple of questions. Can you lease part of the water right, or has it got to be the whole thing?
Yeah, leases are a really flexible tool. So you can lease part of a water right or part of a season of a water right. They can be very flexibly structured.
And does it have to be certified or can it be a claim?
It depends sort of if you're in an adjudicated basin or a non-adjudicated basin. In adjudicated basins, which is this sort of court process where everybody who thinks they have a water right, whether that's a claim or a certificate or any other form of water rights that have been developed or somehow documented. In the white salmon area, since a lot of it is not as adjudicated, what matters more is the beneficial use history, that you can show ecology that you have been using water and water use has been continuous since that was first established. Less important sort of what the actual title on that document might be.
So we are the last 30 years we've been irrigating roughly, I think 220 acres of alfalfa, white salmon, and use them. And we subdivided one piece of property, so we're not using all the water that we were using, but it's none of it's. I've looked at the water rights online and it's all claimed. So but I know that Mount Adams Orchard wants more water. So is that something we can move? Is that idea a good idea, you think?
Yeah, in general, I can't talk to too many specifics, but in general, yes, there is you're able to divide water rights. So, take part of the place of use and just peel off that piece of the water right. I would say if you were interested in sort of that kind of transaction, we might be able to look a little bit, but also I'd point you to some of the water consultants and water rights attorneys who'd be able to give better advice on that.
What's the value of a water right? Is it something that's like actually, is it pennies or is it something that's significant enough that it's worth our time?
Yeah, we often give the classic, it depends. Water is highly variable in how much it's worth. Some of that has to do with the priority date of that water. Some of it just has to do with how active there is a water market in the area that you're in. There's a number of sort of valuation tools that are used to value water rights. We kind of say it's anywhere from $100 an acre foot to $10,000 an acre foot. It really depends on the location, the size, to see how sort of flexible and movable that water is. So I can't give you a really good answer on that other than it's not always an easy question to answer. But again, if you were looking to do a transaction, we're sort of particularly on the environmental sort of market side can help with that, or could point you to sort of some valuation firms that are specific to water rights.
Thank you.
Great questions, everybody. Any other burning questions now for the Water Trust folks? We'll have a little time at the end too to dig in. I think they've offered to stay on and available for looking up specific water rights or showing you how to do that if you're interested. And then they're available for that confidential consultation if you really want to learn more about any specific water right situation you're in. So that is a good option, and we'll make sure to get their contact information out to anybody who wants it. And there's also a few printouts and handouts over here in the room for people to take. So with that, I want to introduce John Culp. So everything works. Let's see. So John Culp has joined us today. We're grateful for that. He joined the commission in 2001, served programs manager. Previously, John worked for the Underwood Conservation District, where he was a natural resource planner, and he served 4 years in the United States Army Thank you for your service. He has a BA from Central Washington University, and John served as a council member for the city of Okanagan from 1999 through 2013, as well as mayor from 2014 through 2022. He is a life member of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, enjoys the outdoors through camping, hiking, hunting, riding, and raising organic chicken, eggs, and vegetables. Let's welcome John Culp.
Thank you, Tova. Do I need to stand over here? Or
I think that'll do it.
is your best place?
Yep, just click yourself forward.
Okay. Great. I have the answer to one of the questions before, just to help along. It's for the ponds, it's the Dam Safety Office at Ecology that regulates those, and the threshold is 10 acre feet. Any pond over 10 acre feet requires a permit for the dam itself, and then the water rates typically require 2 water rates for a new pond, one to actually divert and fill the pond, and then the other to take water out of the pond. But anyway, so but yeah, the Ecology Regional Office in Union Gap would definitely be the place to touch base with. So Tessa and Nathan can help you get connected with them. So, all right. I guess I forgot to say that I'm from Okanagan. So almost if you go down and hit 97, Highway 97, and go north to about probably 45 miles from the Canadian border, that's where I'm from. Lived there most of my life, except for college and the Army, and I've spent a little bit of time down here. Our irrigation efficiencies program, I don't remember the year yet, but played a huge role in the White Salmon Irrigation District, piping Lockwood Creek. And so there was an example of also an illustration of the use of the Trust Water Right program in the White Salmon Basin, because when we pipe an open ditch like that, almost all open ditches, if they're on soil, have some ditch loss to them. And so you create efficiency by putting it in pipe, you nullify the ditch loss. And so what the efficiencies program was doing at that time was doing in-stream flow enhancement, which was mentioned, in their Trust Water presentation. And so we would essentially, I guess, harvest the saved water, all that stuff that wasn't being delivered, and took that portion of the water rate and put it in the Trust Water Right program, so that the water savings would just stay in Buck Creek for the ESA list and so on. It's in there. It was a great project, and the Conservation District did really well, and it got them all educated up in the irrigation efficiencies program. And so off we go. This presentation is going to focus less on those piping projects and more on the other side of the program that we do, and that's the on-farm stuff. So let's move along. So where we used to do in-stream flow enhancement, now our largest criteria is every project has to save water. Yes.
Zoom isn't getting me advanced slides.
Oh,
Sorry. It's one of those silly things. The answer.
you stole the presenter.
You are. So if we want to share the screen, we just want to get this to show up. It's great on the screen for us, right? Well, not that. All right. Technology. There you go. That looks good here. Don't know for sure.
No.
No.
Huh.
It just doesn't advance. Is that correct?
I think it's me, because the presentation I gave in ENIAC last night, my computer just guide. So I had to do the tap dance,
Did that change it overnight?
without the pretty picture.
Oh, that was good, okay.
Better?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so, we will continue. So now, as you'll see on the slide, every project that we fund in the irrigation efficiencies program, which is I don't want to say it's a grant program, but it is a grant program, but we don't write checks to people. The conservation district is the project manager. And so all of the work done here locally is the conservation district program. This program is statewide, so all 45 conservation districts can use it. And actually, maybe I should take a step back. I should have said, like the other two entities that have presented before, I work for the State Conservation Commission, and which most people don't know what that is, but a state agency, a very small state agency that, man, people say that we oversee for the 45 conservation districts in the state, but we really don't. We really partner with them, and they partner with us. We always consider ourselves on equal standing as part of the family, like the 46th, except we just play a different. The Conservation Commission gets money from the state legislature and creates programs like this one, and then we offer them to conservation districts as tools for their toolbox to do their local natural resource conservation work. And so, this irrigation efficiencies program is just one of those tools. It's been in existence for 22 years, and as far as me being the program manager of the efficiencies program, I've been with the commission for 22 years. So they hired me to create and implement this program with a steering committee of stakeholders, and actually Washington Water Trust was one of those way back when in 2002 when we started rolling. But anyway, so we just rewrote the guidelines for the program, just rolled it out. The application, we started taking applications on Tuesday of this week, and so this is as fresh as it gets. So new guidelines, and that's what we're going to be seeing today. So all projects have to save water. This program is a water savings program. Used to be focused on in-stream flow enhancement. We still do that, but we've also opened it up to these other reasons why a land manager would want to save water on their farm. We only do irrigated agricultural water or agricultural irrigation water. And so we don't do municipalities, we don't do anything with domestic or industrial, we just work with irrigators. And then, so the second one is a little bit obscure, but basically, so our NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, kind of the federal partner of conservation districts. They have a set of standards and specifications for all best management practices, all projects and pieces of projects. All of our stuff needs to be built to that standard. And so in this program, the district likely wouldn't have you design your own pipeline and then use your tractor to install it. Pipeline person would have to be engineered by a state certified engineer or an NRCS engineer or a conservation district cluster engineer, although they are state stamped or have that professional stamp. And so, and there's a number of reasons why this is, but it's the standard that the commission has adopted for years, that all of our best management practices have to be designed and implemented to. And so I put this in here, it's more pointed towards districts, but what I wanted to say is with our projects, the conservation district gets technical assistance dollars that will pay for the engineering. I listed it as design here because sometimes it's not like an engineer designing. If it's a sprinkler system, it can be done by a certified irrigation designer. And so a lot of irrigation vendors will have certified irrigation designers on staff. And that does meet the NRCS standard and spec. But then also NRCS has people with job approval authority, which can do the same thing. And so we just lumped it under design. And then, so the district will also do development. So like, if there's ground disturbing activity, cultural resource assessment is a necessity for all of our work. And so all of that upfront work that gets the project to a contractable, implementable place is funded through the conservation district. So there's very little upfront cost to get to where we could say, yes, this project is good to go for financial assistance, which is where we're headed. So for financial assistance, it's first come, first served. So we accept applications every work day of the year. And we're gonna do application polls at the end of every month. And so there's no application window right now. So talk to your conservation district. Each district can only get 2 projects per fiscal year. That's kind of the standard. We have a clause in our guidelines that if there's more funding available, then they meet some certain criteria, we'll go back and look and possibly fund a 3rd or a 4th project. On farm projects, cost share up to $400,000 per landowner per fiscal year. Fiscal year is July 1st through June 30, because we have to make it complicated. And the cost share rate, so the amount of the project that the district can pay for is set by district policy. And so we used to have an 85% program cap, but we did away with that. So whatever the district's cost share rate policy is, and I should have brushed up on that before.
It's 75% with allowances up to 100%. So
Okay.
exceptions are allowed.
Okay, all right, you heard it here, folks. Okay, and then these conveyance or purveyor projects, so that's the ditch to pipe, that's the White Salmon Irrigation District. There's no cap on those because they can run into the millions of dollars. And I think the biggest one we've done in our program so far was about $2.5 million in the pipeline down in the Walla Walla, or the Toucan tributary to Walla Walla. And we're developing one in the Met Hal that's about 15 million guesstimate. So, so anyway, that's why we took the cap off that. But of course, there's some kind of budgetary and future scoping for some of those things because we don't want to wipe out our small pot of money before we get everybody's projects funded. So there's the specs again, and then this one's kind of important too, the last one. They have to be done by the end of a biennium. And so the state budget's on a 2-year cycle. The current biennium that we're in now ends on June 30 of 25. So we've got roughly not quite a year and a half left in this biennium. So, if you were doing a great big piping project, you'd want to think about how much time you have and then set it up in phases. Usually an on-farm sprinkler system, if you were doing 250 acres of hay and you could put that under 1 or 2 pivots, you could probably get it done easily in that amount of time. Well, I'm not sure. Does your ground freeze here in the winter? Yes, sometimes. Okay. All right. So anyway, yeah. If there are years it doesn't, you guys have way more flexibility than a lot of people. But yeah. So the application, I already said that. Yep, got that. And so I just wanted to put these kind of things in here just to reiterate it. So these are questions in the application, just to show that, there's a delineation for those cost share caps, and then also the design thing and that the job approval authority but conservation district are masters at knowing which BMPs are engineering BMPs and which aren't. And so they'll be able to help you work your way through the application. The application is actually It resides on the commission's irrigation efficiency webpage, but the district is gonna fill it out for you. So it's an easy, simple form, but they will work with you. We pay them for their staff time to work with you to collect the necessary data to get us to a contractable project. And so here again, I put this in here, the summary piece. It's a little bit vague, but it's kind of like trying to prove your water right, like Nathan was talking about. It's or I guess maybe it was Tessa, but anyway, it's as much information as possible. The specifics around it, and certainly, Tova's aware with the other project that we did here that we, in the application, we need as much information as we possibly can get to make the funding decision. And so if we don't have enough, I'll bug, well, probably James, right? It's not Tova anymore for the project. I'll bug James, James will bug you, and we'll get as much information in there as we possibly can. All right, I'm not gonna read down through these, but so one of the things that we did in the old program, there were only about 15 best management practices listed. And so if you couldn't make your project fit into those, it became complicated. And so what we've done in the new program is switched over to fund eligible activities. And so this allows the district a little more flexibility to help you kind of create a project that fits your operation under activities where we don't have to quibble over individual BNPs. They're gonna find the ones that match the activities to create the project to save the water. And there's a lot of interesting opportunities in here that the steering committee came up with. So to include the replacement of nozzles and gaskets in old wheel lines and hand lines. How many times you drive down the highway, you see the little geysers or the little fan of water at the joints. For very little investment, we can save a lot of water. And so, and one of the new things in this program is there's no trust water right required out of each project. It's still an option because we still need to be able, every project needs to create public benefit, right? And that's where the safe water piece comes in. In the old program, we could easily point to the public benefit by saying, we have a trust water right generated out of that project. It's a widget. You can hold a trust water right in your hand, well, the paper that's printed on, I guess. But oftentimes that didn't create or preserve the public benefit, the conservation, the water being in stream, because, well, I won't get into into how water works, consumptive, non-consumptive, primary reach, secondary reach. There's a lot of mechanics that to go on. That's water rights 102. And but anyway, and so what we determined was that when we need to apply a trust water right to a project because of the complexity of the water right or the complexity of the operation, how it works, and we need to maybe regulate that safe water past a downstream diverter or something, then it would, and that's something that we would flesh out in the application process. So nobody's gonna spring it on you, but before we got to the contract part, it would be, hey, we think that to create this for the public to fund it, right? These are all tax dollars. Public's funding it, they've got to get something out of it. In-stream flow for ESA listed salmon is easy to point that to that and say there's a public benefit. But anyway, so I'm gonna move to the next slide because there is a whole nother slide of eligible activities. And so irrigation water management plans, we can also save a lot of water with just irrigation water management plans. How deep is your effective root zone on your crop? How much water can the soil, your soil in that spot hold in that effective root zone? And then how much water how quickly can you fill that up, given the capacity of your irrigation system? If you have all of those, you can apply the right amount of water at the right time, every time, and nullify crop water stress. It increases productivity with just management, no infrastructure, no dollars spent to buy a new valve or whatever. And so we can make a lot of hay with that, pun intended. So. And so soil moisture monitoring equipment that goes hand in hand with that, with irrigation water management, it's your gas gauge. You know, you can drive your truck down the road without a working gas gauge and fudge it a little bit if you kind of know how many gallons per mile you get, but it sure is nice to be able to see where you're at. And so that's what soil moisture monitoring equipment can do for you. So, okay, I will say that on that same web page, and I didn't put it up here, but I should have. Nova can certainly get that for you, but are these the guidelines that all of those lists of eligible activities are in the guidelines? It's on the website. There's a guidance document for how to fill out the application, which isn't necessarily important for a potential recipient, but it might give you kind of an idea about what we're looking for. And then there will also be some resource tools up there, both for districts but also for irrigators, irrigation water management planning. That's something that will get a tool that you can go and look and just see, hey, if I didn't want to bug James and have him come out and help me do this, what are the principles that I can easily apply myself? How do I figure out what kind of soil I have? How do I figure out how deep my effective root zone is? Not total root zone, but effective root zone. So all those numbers are available, and then it's just a math problem. So, which we don't have the formulas in there too. So, are there any questions? You know, I talked fast, and so.
You said that there's basically 2 projects approved per district per year.
Mm-hmm.
So like within the Underwood Conservation District.
Yeah.
So how would you ever get down to one person replacing gaskets and stuff? Would it be worthwhile a collective of farmers saying, hey, we want to put in a request to replace all the gaskets in the valley or something?
So we're working on creating that ability in, so if that's something that Tova and her board, well, James and Tova and her board think is important, and there's opportunity, then we would absolutely consider that. We do have a mechanism called district implemented project, which is where the district owns the project. It's not cost share with a land manager. And so that makes doing projects across ownerships easier. The problem when you cluster like that with cost share is who signs the contract? And then who's responsible, because you gotta maintain it. Well, I don't know what the life of a nozzle is, but I guess it depends on the quality of your water, how dirty it is. But anyway, yeah, so we're working on that. The thing is, if Tova or if Underwood CD applied for 2 projects and they were both $500 nozzle gasket and timer valve projects, chances of her getting more projects are huge. And so if Tova applies for a $40,000 irrigation system, she might just be held to the 2. So yeah, we're trying to figure out how to build the flexibility in without, because if we say unlimited, and we've got districts that have 15 center pivot projects in their queue, and they could wipe out a considerable portion of our grant fund. So, so that's our, I guess, management buffer to try and protect against that, so. It is a great idea, it came up last night too, so, it's certainly something we're gonna seriously look into. See if there's an easier way to get at that. So, yeah, I forgot to mention the timer valve thing too, with the gut nozzles and gaskets, because to me, that's where you really make a lot of headway, especially with hand lines and wheel lines, where oftentimes you get out there and change them maybe every 12 hours if you're really on top of it. Some people don't get out till every 24 hours. And if your irrigation season is April through October, there's a lot of potential for water savings in there, because crop water demand is this bell curve through the season. And so in those shoulders, spring and fall, if through your irrigation water management plan, you see, I only need an hour of water based on how much water my system puts out in an hour, then they make valves that either shut the pump off or shut the water off in a line after an hour, or whatever you set it at. And so the potential for savings without a huge investment is pretty big that way too. So anyway, I'll stop. I can ramble all night, so.
So many examples of different projects and possibilities.
And was there anything online? I didn't know. There's a little red.
Yeah,
I
I
can
didn't see
barely
it.
see, but,
That was me putting the link to the
Oh,
program.
okay.
There. So yeah, we got that in there.
it was either too boring or too thorough.
No, that's good. I think there's lots of possibilities. Everybody can reach out to the Conservation District
Yeah.
when you have a project. And what I wanted to cover is really just a couple examples, the one you mentioned actually, so we can see some pictures, some examples of these types of projects in our district here. As long as I get this right. And how does that look over there?
There it goes.
Good? Well, good. Thank you, John.
Yeah,
And we'll
thank you.
definitely have time at the end too for more.
Good.
Q&A
I'm not
and
going
stuff.
anywhere, so.
Okay, great. Well, I just wanted to show some pictures of local projects just so you kind of get a more of a vision of what is possible here with some of these funding sources and what we've done in the past. This is a picture of Rattlesnake Creek. It was mentioned by Ethan. It's in a low flow time of year, and you can see it's just very sparse in terms of how a fish or any other aquatic life are going to travel through and survive in a low flow time like this. Temperature is another problem in Rattlesnake Creek, for example. With low flows, you get higher temperatures, and that can become lethal to fish and other aquatic life. So again, we do support projects in different ways to maintain in-stream flow or increase and enhance in-stream flow where we can. And so we're working in these kinds of streams to enhance that flow and habitat value. Especially, we're trying to work in meadows and wetlands in the headwaters areas. And so there's areas where the streams have incised and disconnected with their floodplains. And those streams are essentially serving as drains, pulling the water out of the groundwater and out of the water table and taking it downstream during high flow seasons, and not really using those headwaters as the sponges to store water that they historically did. So by planting, by helping some of these wetlands and headwater areas recover, we can do a lot to restore the floodplain and the hydrograph for that little watershed. And then in terms of a different type of project, we have done some fish screen work, especially in the White Salmon Valley. Fish screens are required by Washington state law on all surface water diversions. And so WDFW, Fish and Wildlife, is usually the regulatory authority that would be involved in a lack of a fish screen type of issue. But Underwood Conservation District is non-regulatory, and we can be the friendly folks that work with you to help someone come into compliance. So we've done a few of these in the White Salmon River watershed, and here's some examples where an old system Really wasn't compliant with WDFW's fish screen requirements, but the brand new shiny passive pump here was installed in White Salmon River and does a great job for the landowner and brought him into compliance. I am going to focus in on the White Salmon Irrigation District project that John mentioned, because this was a huge project for us. We took it on with the support from the Irrigation Efficiency Grant Program from the State Conservation Commission. And we also had funding from Washington Department of Ecology and the Salmon Recovery Funding Board. So with all those three funding sources, we were able to get a lot of good work done. And I'll explain that a little bit. You can see the project location is on Buck Creek, which is a major tributary to the White Salmon River. And the key components of this project addressed the fish screen, or the lack of a fish screen. It provided fish passage in Buck Creek, and we conserved water by piping the system. So to go into a little more detail, the irrigation diversion was unscreened, and we were able to install a rotating modular drum screen built by Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife at their screen shop in Yakima Nation, or in Yakima, Washington. And then by providing fish passage, there was I'll show a different picture of this in a minute. There was a fish barrier dam in Buck Creek that prevented passage at certain flows for certain fish. And so that blocked passage for ESA listed fish to get about 1.3 miles of upstream habitat for spawning and rearing. So we provided fish passage in Buck Creek by building a roughened channel in the creek, but maintaining the ability for that irrigation diversion to still function. And then we conserved water. 2.39 CFS specifically went into the State Water Trust because we piped an open ditch. And that instantly created savings. It also pressurized the system for the irrigation district and turned it into an on-demand system. So when they turn a faucet on at the other end of the pipe, that's when water gets withdrawn out of Buck Creek. It doesn't constantly pull water off of Buck Creek. So it's actually probably a much higher savings than 2.39 CFS. That's just what's on paper, but because they're not constantly watering and using that full water right, there's a lot more that actually gets saved in Buck Creek when they're not using their full irrigation right. So to just talk about some of those individual pieces, this is the diversion, or was the diversion, and you can see that barrier dam was a couple of 3 feet or so tall. And then when they put their flashboards in, there was even a higher amount to provide that barrier. So we were able to build a roughened channel through this area. And that's what it looks like on the left-hand side, where now there's large boulders and rocks that are smoothing out the gradient and basically providing consistent fish passage through there. And there's even a low flow channel to the left. So if they're putting their flashboards where the person's standing there, there's a low flow channel on the far left here that fish can still pass through. And the diversion point is still over there on the right, and you can see the concrete structure. And then further downstream, as the water gets pulled off, it eventually runs into this modular drum screen. So that's the screen on the lower right corner of the slide that was built by Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And the water comes through and seeps through this drum screen and carries on through into an actual irrigation pipe at that point. And any overflow water that's not being pulled into the pipe goes off to the right here, and flows back into Buck Creek. So there's just a very short section that's dewatered slightly from this irrigation diversion, and the rest of it goes right back into the creek right there. And then there's the piping, and this is an old map that shows the kind of the patchwork of different types of pipe they had. They used to have corrugated plastic pipe, concrete pipe, metal pipe, open ditch, all of the different ways that they had managed it in the past that had worked okay, but there were always, things to repair and definitely loss through the leaks in the system, and then the open earthen canals. So you can kind of see what it looked like where there were open ditches throughout this area. And then those were some of the leaks that they were constantly battling. And then this is after during and after we placed HDPE pipe for about, 9,000 feet in length. And so that, again, pressurized the system and prevented massive amounts of loss. So there were ecological benefits that I've highlighted here, talking about fish passage and the entrapment issue that was happening with the lack of a fish screen, and the water savings for the rest of Buck Creek downstream. Plus the community benefits, and that's no small thing, just that we were able to provide new infrastructure and a reliable source of irrigation for the White Salmon Irrigation District, and it supports 90 users and over 400 acres in the Houston area. And we brought them into compliance with some important state and federal laws. So that was something that we were able to support and help. And then, of course, it just is a great example to the community for how to be responsible with irrigation water and how to be good stewards to the stream. So we're excited to show off this project. And if you drive up the Buck Creek Road sometime to check it out, you'll see this sign that helps explain a little bit more what this project did along Buck Creek for fish and for the community overall. We did construct it in 2 seasons. I think it was 2018 and 2019. So again, it was probably the largest project we've ever done. And we're very proud and grateful for the support that we had from our funding sources. So thank you. These were some of the online sources that Tessa referred to. So I wanted to put them up on the screen, but we've also printed them here today. So you're welcome to take a copy of that or follow up with one of us, James or I, to get those links in an email. And otherwise, here's just a few more links about Underwood Conservation District and what we have going on, including our native plant sale and our farm tool library. And then, of course, how to get back in touch with the Water Trust if you want to have a private consultation about your water right questions. And I think that's my last slide for tonight. But we can, again, field questions if there are any, or dig into any individual water right questions if you want to try to do that here, or just at least see a demonstration of the Water Rights Explorer. You can do that too. Any preferences, any questions at this point, and interests? Everyone's absorbed all of that information, I'm sure, percolating on it.
How much that project cost?
Oh, man. I think it was, you're asking the wrong time when I don't have it in my head. Do you remember how much funding came from the commission? I think I have to.
No, I didn't.
It was like-
Number bigger number.
Yeah. Lockdown might.
That's the thing. Get the number for you. I guess it was expensive. 3 different sources of funds. So yeah.
Say that 9,000 feet of pipe cost 3 times as much today.
Yeah.
You said, and cost, well, everything, yeah. Yeah, I last night I was, in any other irrigation district was commiserating about it. But I told them right before the meeting, I bought a little can of nuts and then their grocery store cost 7. So. Okay. So, yeah, just pipe.
There was a comment thanking the presenters, so thank you, Tessa and Ethan and Jonathan. Yeah, anybody else have questions or comments? We can always follow up individually. Right. Well, with that, we'll just close the official Zoom session here. Thank you all for being online. Those of you that made it, and I'm checking to make sure this, okay, just another thank you there. And thank you all for showing up. We appreciate you braving the roads tonight.